If you're following along, you know that we're at an incredibly exciting time in the world of smart protein and particularly plant-based foods. Globally, the sector has taken massive strides, with companies like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, and Oatly scaling across the world to multiple billions of dollars in valuations and even going public on the New York Stock Exchange. Traditional food and meat giants like Cargill, Unilever, and Nestle have either invested in or launched their own line of plant-based meats, and the epicenter of the sector has increasingly shifted to Asia in recent years. In India, the sector is just beginning to take off, with exciting new launches and partnerships being announced by new brands every week. It's very gratifying to see all of this come together, but we think a number of open questions still remain on how to build, position, launch, and scale a plant-based foods and plant-based meat business. So we've got a very interesting session here with two leaders and experts from different parts of the Indian food world. They're also wonderful friends of GFI India and have been doing a lot of deep thinking about plant-based meats as the next big thing in food. Gauri Devidayal is a celebrated restaurateur and entrepreneur who operates influential brands in Mumbai like The Table, Iktara, and Mag Street Kitchen. She's held leadership positions at the National Restaurants Association of India and is a celebrated thought leader in the worlds of flavor, culture, and regenerative, sustainable living. Keyur Bhatia, on the other hand, is a food distributor extraordinaire. His company, TJ UK Trade Networks, has a large ground force getting foods into retail and restaurants all over the country. And he served as president of the National Food Service Distributors Association of India for nearly 4 years. Over the next 25 minutes, we're going to dive into a tactical masterclass for plant-based food entrepreneurs across flavor, texture, positioning, distribution, channel strategy, all the good stuff. And we're doing it in Gauri's beautiful Mag Street Kitchen venue, all over the tasting of some delicious plant-based meats. Plant-based meats sounds like an oxymoron, but it's the most exciting thing in food. People have been saying we should eat chickpeas, not chicken, or broccoli, not beef, for decades because of the things we all care about. Climate change, greenhouse gases, ocean dead zones, deforestation, pandemics. But of course, eat chickpeas, not chicken doesn't work. What does is delectable, fragrant, juicy, indulgent foods that feel like a simple switch and not a sacrifice. That's what companies all over the country are bringing to market as we speak. And they're going beyond the burger to serve up delicious keemas, kebabs, samosas, and biryanis, all without breaking the planet. Now that's smart protein. So Gauri, Keyur, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time and in this beautiful space. Gauri, thank you for the space. So look, we're going to taste 4 different products from 4 different companies, plant-based meat products. And of course, we could have chosen like 20. We kind of chose them at random here. 2 appetizers, 2 mains. And we'll have an open, free-flowing conversation about how things are changing and get the benefit of your insights. So maybe we can try, first let's try these mutton samosas, plant-based mutton samosas. It's by a company called Shaka Harry, which is a very cute name. Shaka Harry, of course, is a play on Shaka Harry, which means vegetarian in Hindi. As we try these, I just want to ask you a question. I mean, if you look at the taste, the texture here, and the flavor, the aroma, all of that stuff, please go ahead.
The pressure.
So, I mean, as you're chewing on that, my question for you really is, you both have unique vantage points into food coming from slightly different angles. What would you say has changed over the last several years? What is really making there be so much attention on this space from various corners?
I mean, there's definitely more, information out there now than there was even 2 years ago. And of course, COVID has brought it even more to the fore just because people are more health conscious. And I think, overall, there's just a growing awareness about sustainability on several fronts, and food is one part of it. All these things are going to make people, sit up and listen. Consuming it is a whole different challenge, but I think that at least it's a step in the right direction.
So I would agree with what Gauri is saying. Generally, awareness has gone up. The first time that I got aware of the vegan movement, if I may call it so, was about 20 years back. But it was very quiet, and few people were doing it. 5 years back, when I think the movie or the documentary Game Changers came, and it just changed the landscape. At least that's what I feel. And suddenly we had all these little brands coming up, or gourmet brands having a vegan option, etc., etc., and it's just caught on. And I think COVID was like a watershed moment for the entire wellness movement. I mean, whether it is organic or it is plant-based, whatever. And the second thing which I've noticed very strongly, like my son lives in LA, so I understand that he understands plant-based and all of this. But my niece who lives in Bombay, who is a 16-year-old girl, they talk about sustainability, about the planet, and it's like a serious issue. It's not just cool anymore. It's about their lives, right? So that moment is really caught on. And the new generation is very, very serious about this. It's not just cool thing to do or just healthy thing to do once in a while, but it's their lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I think these are great points. I think the overarching movement of sustainability and, like you said, veganism coming in, etc., has been certainly growing over the last several years. What we've seen, though, is internationally at least, and even in India, a lot of these producers of plant-based meats, the thing that's changed from our perspective is they've focused much more on meat eating, on perfectly giving people the taste of meat. But let's stay with the drivers here a little bit, right? So you mentioned the younger generation is very interested in sustainability, etc. From our perspective, we think that there's a difference between being driven to try something versus actually being able to eat it and buy it regularly, right? So for a plant-based producer, what would your advice be in terms of the drivers of consumption and repeat purchases, etc.?
I would say that there are three things, but the first and the most important for me is flavor. That is literally critical. So a lot of what we've been talking about, like sustainability and awareness about the health factors, etc., will maybe get you to try it once. But repeat customers only going to come if you get the product right. So from a restaurant's perspective, working with these ingredients, of course, restaurants and chefs will have a big part to play in bringing that flavor to these raw ingredients. But for products that are like the samosa, which is essentially fry it and eat it,
Yeah.
the base product needs to be fantastic. That's regardless of whether you're trying to convert existing non-vegetarian to sort of a little shift in their diet, or you're appealing to an existing vegetarian to just eat a really delicious samosa. I really think flavor is going to be the key thing to focus on, and the other two aspects are going to be price, which I think Keyur, obviously that's where you come in more with packaged goods, and a continuing awareness about the product, which moves away from just the sustainability angle, but also as to well, why is this good?
So, very interesting point that Gauri's made, and I completely am with her on this, that it has to be based on taste and texture and flavor for sure for the adoption to happen really. Price, yes, it's very important. You have to mass base this product. It has to be available to everybody. At this point of time, I think most of the products, most of the brands which are there in the market are at a premium over meat products. If they can bring it at par or bring it slightly lower because it's plant-based, maybe it's more sustainable, maybe it's cheaper to make. And with efficiency, of scale coming in, I think it's definitely possible to bring it down. Making the product available in all the channels of sales, which is retail and food service both. I personally would, my advice to manufacturers or brand owners would be to first back food service because that's a far better way to get new customers in and convert customers because the trial is happening. It's like a paid trial nearly, right? Otherwise, if you were to go to a supermarket and do a trial, the cost would be far higher and adoption much lower. Over here, you have the right TG if it's going to a restaurant. And not only that, you will touch so many more people with that same one portion that you sold. Everybody on the table is going to try. It's something new.
So I want to stay with that point. I think that is incredibly important because, as you were saying, food service can be a launchpad for a new category.
Absolutely.
And we were saying that before the pandemic, right? So let's stick with that and get back to it. In the meantime, I think we should try the second shami kebab here from a company called Greenest Foods out of Delhi, but now expanding across India.
Thank you.
Keyur?
Thank you.
I have to say, just looking at it, it does look. I could be fooled by that one.
So just to react, as you're tasting, just to react to some of the stuff you were saying, Gauri, you mentioned at first that there is kind of an early adopter market here. Keyur, you also mentioned that your son living in LA knows what all of this stuff is, right? So almost like let's call it the game changers cohort. People who've tried these products abroad, maybe they have a Spotify premium subscription. That's kind of the cohort that we're thinking of, right? So people who are globalized, they understand what's going on. They're consuming, they're actually eating meat.
You mean woke?
Woke. I'm tiptoeing around the word woke. But they're actually eating like their global counterparts in Singapore or LA or New York. In this early adopter cohort, we're actually seeing huge interest in this because they already know what it is and why to do it, right? So 63% of these people say that they're very or extremely likely to purchase plant-based meat regularly if it matches the taste of meat because they're already eating meat a lot. For them, it's more of a reduction thing. But this is India and it's very complex. There's multiple, you really have to segment the market and look at different sections of society, right? So, by the way, what do you think of the shami kebabs?
It's interesting. The texture is definitely, very close to a non-veg product.
Coming to my question, you were talking about food service being a launchpad. We were talking about that. India is very much multi-channel, right? But food service can be a launchpad. You mentioned many of these products are heat and eat at home. People may want to work directly with chefs and figure out what formats make sense. So what would be your top tips or playbook for people to come in and let's say work with a restaurant like The Table to launch this category? Where do you see a gap right now? Because most of these companies are now starting to think about that post-pandemic.
So, like Keyur said and what we've been talking about, restaurants are a great platform. You look at Impossible and what they've done with Burger King and, it's just put the brand on the map. Also sort of collaborating with chefs, like getting a sort of endorsement from like a David Chang. Of course, that's invaluable. But I think that, there's two different ways, right? So when you're going to retail, there's a brand presence. When you're going to a restaurant, you're not necessarily going to have a brand presence. So of course, like, a burger chain will say, it's an Impossible burger, but you're not going to have that for every item on a menu that you're using. So I think it's about getting people to try and, like you said, that you may not even have realized that this is plant-based, right? So it's literally about just getting people to try. That's the first step. And like you said, that it's not, it's much more costly to be doing that at a supermarket than to be doing that at a restaurant. So I think, firstly, just understanding that it's a different approach, working with restaurants in this initial stage, and it is very initial. Restaurants have not, unless you're a vegan restaurant or you're already in that sort of category, a restaurant like ours, which is not sort of, which serves everything, getting onto that menu is so important. And I think that's what brands should focus on rather than saying, I'm going to sell you the product at this price. At least at that initial stage. So I think that just talking to chefs, understanding that, again, the product should be something that is then unique to that restaurant. It's not going to be something that's available everywhere. So certain raw ingredients that then a chef can work with will work better than a ready-made product.
Keyur, similar question, right? So Gauri mentioned price. You mentioned earlier as well, flavor, price. These are the two biggest components of getting people to repeatedly purchase this stuff. Now, you've worked with brands and helped establish categories across the country through your distribution network and just going really deep into a specific category, understanding what it's all about and scaling it. So in terms of synthesizing everything we're talking about, how would you say we can go as a category, or these products, companies can go as a category from high-end, initially helping the early adopters try, through to the mass market like Impossible Foods is in Burger King in the US?
So to add to Gauri's point, I was saying that brand owners need to consider food service clients or food service outlets as their partners, right? And they would have to work backwards to understand what is it that their consumers would like. They have to put an army of junior chefs which will handhold the back-end team of the restaurant to make sure that the product is done right and all the applications of the product, this can be done this way, that way, and that would help in actually deeply penetrating that restaurant or the TG of that restaurant or the customers of that restaurant. This, I would say, is a very, very critical point. Also, to create actually manuals on saying that how the product is to be used, one, and second is that how the restaurant benefits from using these products. Like, what would be the per plate cost? Does it match up with their normal multiple that they have between the food costs and the price at which it is sold? And how it would help the restaurant actually enhance their business and their revenues, and hence also help them improve their bottom lines. That is the level of nuance that they will have to get into eventually. And fortunately, I think the food service market is full of warm people. Restaurant owners are typically very, very passionate people. They love their food. They're creative guys. So they're more welcoming. And there's enough opportunity to do this.
I just want to add to that as well that a lot of these products, which, of course, not just the reheat and eat ones or fry and eat, but ones where there's a little bit of preparation involved, if you don't do it the right way, you might not enjoy it because you've not actually enjoyed it in the best possible way.
Absolutely.
So getting sort of it done by a professional and getting it to taste as you want it to taste is so important, for that first inroad into people's lives. But having said that, I want to kind of, as a restaurateur, every restaurant wants to have a unique menu, right? So it's also about finding that balance of how you get a product which is, like this, which is essentially a, fry and eat product, getting that through across sort of multiple restaurants, which then have the same item on the menu, is also going to be tricky. So.
Base products is what you're talking about.
Right. So basically having something that a chef can then work with and put their twist on versus, a ready-made product that you don't really have to add much to it from your sort of, personal repertoire is also something that I think brands should keep in mind when they're pitching to restaurants. Don't look at restaurants as a place where you're going to be communicating information about the brand. Okay, so, your menu is not going to say it's made, it may not say that it's made with all, these amazing ingredients, it's, good for the planet and all of that, right? It's going to be about the flavor and hitting the spot on that front. So recognize that there's that. On the supermarket shelf, on the other hand, you've got all your ingredients there. You can scream on your packaging about, why it's good for you. And then the second thing is, sort of building on the point about treating restaurants as partners rather than as your sort of customer.
These are all great points, and I think let's try the next product.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say as we do that, so this is a keema by Blue Tribe Foods, another Mumbai-based company scaling across India right now.
Thank you.
And this is actually made by the chefs here at Mag Street, so they've done their own recipe with the keema, which is great. So what you were saying about flavor being the foundation, and nothing else is going to really compensate for it. We're seeing that. So even in the early adopter market, the way that people want to be marketed to, let's talk about fragrance, flavor. I mean,
Texture.
Absolutely. People are telling us that when they think about meat, they even think about the layer of oil floating on top of a curry. And I mean, that's all, it's a multi-sensorial experience. It's incredibly indulgent. It's celebratory, like you said. People don't want to be bombarded with that information when they try it at a restaurant, right? So these are all great nuggets of advice. And then Keyur, like you said, you need to build a ground force. I think as the companies, these ones and others scale, they'll need to build that maturity in terms of sales teams and across different channels and things like that, right? So could you tell us a little bit more about scaling and other categories that you've seen, right? That have gone from this early adopter market to the true mass market, because there would be a difference between how we take things forward.
Like I said earlier also, that, pricing of this product has to be reasonable, where people don't mind selling it at the same price as they would sell a non-vegetarian dish, right? First, I think that is what is very, very important. And for that, the brand owners will have to invest, do their back end, do their homework so that, they can price it the same thing. The base of the products, in my opinion, is plant-based. So why should it be more expensive than animal-based? When we talk about scaling up, soya chap is a great example. It got adapted very well in North India, not so much in Bombay.
Soya chap is textured soy products that have been around for decades. Yeah.
And it got so well adapted that, if you go to an average wedding in North India, you'll have a soya chap as a dish, because it's so well adapted culturally. So what did they do? They brought it to the average Joe at a price point which was affordable, and they actually created a category. This does not need to be very, very elitist. In fact, that is not the way to scale up, right? You're talking of non-vegetarians who are always going to be the easier people to convert, right? I mean, they have health reasons or whatever their reasons might be to try and convert, and they are the big consumers. Do they just go to the top restaurants of Bombay or the top gourmet shops of Bombay? They do not. They go everywhere. So you will have to make the product available everywhere. And adoption, like we already established, that through food service would be a great place to adapt and, increase the base of customers. And what is unique about India is the mass, right? I mean, it's the bottom of the pyramid. That's what's beautiful about India, right? Eventually, I feel the big brands or the big FMCG companies, the giants who have deep pockets to invest money to create categories will get in. But typically, as has been seen in India very often, is that they will get in when the market seems to be the right size. But yeah, eventually it'll get there. But before that time comes, I think get a product which is right price, get a strategy which works for food service very, very clearly. I would go so far as, printing menus for them. Like she said earlier in the other conversation, why do we want to call it meat? Maybe we can just call it like soya chap, a new category.
Sure.
It does not really need to be meat. It can just be a delicious Shami kebab.
Because that audience might not actually be bothered about the whole health benefit of switching, right?
Absolutely,
so they just want one more delicious product.
Yeah, delicious product.
Which is where then the price comes in really,
And
so
these are very delicious.
Yeah, they are. I mean, even this keema, and, credit to our chef as well for
it's
for
really
making it, but it tastes like keema.
The real thing,
yeah. I think just, listening to Keyur as well, like it's, what's important is that for different audiences, there has to be a different strategy, right?
Yep.
So if you're going to the masses, all they care about is price. They're not going to care about, the sort of nutrition factor. Of
And
course,
taste.
flavor. Flavors,
Taste,
I mean, when it's food,
non-negotiable.
that's a given, right? That's a given. And when you're coming to, restaurants and you're coming to sort of, there, I think, because there has to be a little bit more education about the product and, so that can be passed on to guests who will be in a place where they want to, know a little more. So it's really about understanding the market that you're trying to appeal to.
Yeah, and I think we need to go to where the ball is going, right? So initially you're going to be, the launchpad is going to be, you mentioned this earlier to me, like high to low. Like we might start with a high-end restaurant, right? As a category that might be where it starts.
Absolutely.
And then for Burger King, etc., to take it on, it might take a long time. And the true mass market will be even more unforgiving on taste and price than the upper end of the market. That just makes sense completely.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that across all the experiences that the entrepreneurs are having. Some of these products like the Shami kebabs, etc., they were marketed as vegan in experiments, and people found that it didn't get taken up. Only when it was marketed as a Shami kebab that's meant to replace a chicken Shami kebab were people able to understand it and take it forward.
Yeah,
So
just call it vegetarian.
Yeah. So on that note, the idea of it being not a sacrifice, if you're looking to switch, then it's a simple switch. If you're looking to try something new, it's something exciting and new. Why don't we try the biryani, the last
Yeah,
dish?
sure.
Speaking of biryani,
Yeah, so
yes.
biryani, as we know, is like, it's a traditional celebratory dish in India. This is a plant-based biryani from a newish company called Imagine Meats. This is another exciting offering from the world of Indian plant-based meats. On the subject of everything we just discussed, we are living in a post-pandemic world, and we can't get away from that, obviously. Keyur, you mentioned that companies, large companies, Nestle, Unilever, ITC, these companies getting into the space may be what drives adoption in the true mass market, and they'll need to get there, right?
Education. See, for educating a market, you need a lot of marketing dollars. The assumption which I'm making here is that most of the companies that India has seen are mainly small to medium enterprises, right? Of course, a lot of them are backed by VC funds and institutional money, but not many of them have that kind of. India's a big country. Come on, guys. I think the Indian consumer is one amongst the most difficult consumers to please anywhere in the world, right? We've got so many cuisines. We are exposed to so many cuisines in India.
So my question, on the back of that is, after the pandemic, what have you seen that's new in terms of maybe business models, things that people are trying? Cooking at home is something we've heard about a lot. And what do you think is just going to return to the way it was?
So it's a bit of both. There's definitely a lot of people going back to what they have missed out on for a long time and fulfilling all those cravings for things that they've already known. And then there's also the aspect of obviously cooking at home, deliveries become huge. Everything from meal kits to and in terms of there's two aspects. There's the way you eat, the format of eating, and then there's what you eat, right? So for the way you eat, there's delivery, cooking, there's semi-prepared meal kits, obviously dining out. What you eat, I would say, yes, there's some, larger awareness than before about being healthier possibly. But I do feel, again, coming back to that point about food being all about comfort and feeling good and feeling satisfied and satiated. It really comes down to what makes you feel that way. So if there are products out there that can satisfy all those factors and they happen to be plant-based, that's wonderful.
Yep.
So yes, new formats have come. Direct to consumer has become larger than ever, thanks to the pandemic and the lockdowns effect. And that channel is very, very interesting because you're talking directly to the consumer, and that never really happened in the past, right? For brands, it's immensely valuable because they're getting feedback from the customer. They don't need an agency. They don't need listeners. They don't need anybody. They can just pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I like. So I think it's a very interesting channel and should definitely be looked at very closely. And that is actually going to help them perfect their product and their offering and sharpen their value proposition in every parameter which matters for a business to be successful. The traditional formats of e-commerce, modern trade, food service all continue to thrive, and they'll all be back now. I would seriously suggest that these companies should basically look at how are they going to spread their products to more and more sales channels. The Indian diaspora is expanding so fast globally, and generally it's been seen that they are usually at the higher economic strata in most countries where they are placed. Products like these, which are very Indian or Indianized with the Indian palate, would be a great export market. These products have been around for a very, very long time, but how do you Indianize them, right? How do you create the right spice blend and the right hotness, and the right names? So I think it's fantastic, exciting times.
No, and also, just adding to that, now that you're mentioning it, in the West where there's a lot more awareness about the health benefits, etc., there's a growing audience for it, there's a growing acceptance. Having sort of Indian products that meet all that are even, it seems like a very low-hanging fruit.
I'm hearing in terms of, go across channels, do different things, different formats. And you're right, you're both right. The export market, for a couple of reasons, 3 reasons, we're seeing distributors, food service, everyone really interested in Indian companies. The first is format. Like you said, you're not going to get a samosa from some of the companies abroad. The second is cost basis, right? So maybe think of foreign markets as a dual market opportunity along with India, because we can make things more affordably here. They might be expensive for the Indian market immediately, but they won't be necessarily for the US or Europe market. So
Absolutely.
It's kind of a make in India, make for the world type opportunity. And the third is, and maybe we'll get there, might take some time, innovation in ingredients. So in our indigenous agri biodiversity, chickpeas, millets, if you can make plant-based milks and meats out of a out of chickpeas or millets and different types of pulses, hemp. There's all kinds of cool stuff going on, right? So that would be totally differentiated from like a pea protein or a soy protein that you're seeing abroad. So just to close out, I want to ask both of you, well, first for your overall impressions of how far you think we've come, right? And then if you had to put a final point on what your key takeaway is from this session here today, I'd love to hear that from each of you. So maybe Keyur, you can go first.
The products were fantastic. They are very deceptive. If I were to think about meat and eat them, so I think they're very deceptive. I mean it as a compliment. Even the biryani, I just can't believe that this is not chicken, right? Amazing. And it hardly has any flavor on top of that. It's very mildly flavored and still it stands out. So I think they've done a great job. And I think overall as a category, when I look at the plant-based category and all that it's trying to substitute in terms of animal-based products, I think the best substitution has happened in the meat category. As somebody who's tried other products, I think they've really evolved, the Indian manufacturers, because you are now going to set the benchmark for a category. So if for me, the first time that I've eaten a vegetarian chicken is this, then this becomes a benchmark if I've accepted this, right? So that opportunity is undeniable. It's the writing on the wall. It's an amazing opportunity.
I have tasted a few of these before, but today was a whole new range of products as well, and I'm really amazed. So and I don't give away compliments lightly on food. Trust me. I think I'll sort of just sum it up in a few words, which is that don't say why this is not bad. Say why it is good. And I think that's the communication to focus on, in addition to all the things that we've talked about.
So there you have it. We're very grateful to Gauri and to Keyur for lending us the benefit of their experience and their expertise here today. We've been through a huge amount of insight in that breezy session. We've talked about how at the top end of the market and in the true mass market, flavor is going to be the foundation of everything. We also need to work on bringing down the costs for a fledgling industry, and our advice to entrepreneurs, our experts' advice to entrepreneurs would be think about multi-channels, multiple formats. In particular, as we move beyond the pandemic, food service is going to be back into prominence and a major launchpad for the space, but you need to be able to have the wherewithal to work with food service, to work with restaurants, as well as big chains when it comes to dealing with chefs and working with them to provide base products that they can utilize. And then, of course, when we think about retail, we think about home kits, we think about all kinds of different channels and formats. This is a very exciting time for us in the industry. All the companies and all the people in the ecosystem are going to have to work together to try a number of different experiments and really create a huge category over the next 5 or 10 years. The sky's the limit. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, and we'll see you soon.